Hello, BookTube, and welcome back to the Tiberius Donoghue Book Club. We are dealing this month, the month of May, with a great American poet, the great American poet Elizabeth Bishop. And somewhat oddly, we are not coming at Elizabeth Bishop through her poetry, although I've been very happy to hear how many of you not only approve of this choice for this month, but have gone out and got volumes of poetry. That's wonderful. I think you will live with those volumes of poetry. You will live with those poems for the rest of your life. They're not flashy. They work in among the substrata of your mind, the substrata of your perceptions, and they stick there. They're not flashy, but they're true. That's not an easy thing to do. But we're not reading Elizabeth Bishop's poetry for the month of May. Instead, we're coming at her through this volume. Robert Gottlieb, her longtime editor, her longtime publisher, in 1994 published this big collection of her letters, which her fellow poet and friend Robert Lowell predicted accurately would one day be collected and published. That this is that collection, and it is magnificent. It's one of the great letter collections of all time. That starts off with an introduction by Robert Gero and moves on to give us the letters with minimal editorial fussiness, minimal editorial interference, just enough for you to know the basics of what's going on, but not more than that. The letters, we're reading about 150 pages for this week. It's not strict or anything. The letters will often mention works of art, works of cinema, museum shows that are not particularly well annotated, if they're annotated at all. I think that's wise. I think that's a wise choice on Gero's part. He is, I think, correctly estimating that the more of that there is, the more estranged you will be from the person writing the letters, from the voice in the letters. And that voice is very prominent. Even in the first 150 pages, of course, like all letters collections, moves chronologically each time. So the first 150 pages are a younger Elizabeth Bishop, who's just making her way in the world. She's asking her friends about applying to grant programs or dealing with publishers. And we get to know those friends through her characterizations of them in her letters to them. A lot of them are famous. A lot of them will be known to readers who are familiar with American literature. Edmund Wilson advises her at one point. Robert Lowell, of course, is going to appear rather prominently later on in this book. Margaret Miller, it's the same way. But probably for the first 150 pages, the name that dominates the most is another great poet, the great American poet Marianne Moore, who was 20 or more years older than Elizabeth Bishop and took on the role of a very lively confidant and mentor of a kind. I think both of them would have scoffed at that word, especially Moore, who had an oddly private but generous spirit. She very much liked the company of younger people. She very much liked the questions and the way younger minds, younger talents would sharpen themselves on the whetstone of her fuller mind. And we will get to Marianne Moore on the Steve Tiberius Donoghue Book Club in due time, but she is a prominent figure in these first roughly 150 pages. I wanted to read a couple of letters that Bishop writes to her, just to give you a sense not only of the growing friendship between these two formidable talents, but also something of the way that the tone of the letters just in general. If you've just got your copy of One Art, this is also a thing you're going to live with for the rest of your life. It's a hefty book, but it's not like most letter collections where you read it once and then you're done with it. You're going to go back to it over and over again. This first letter is from 1936. Thank you so much for writing to Mr. Aswell, the editor at Houghton Mifflin. Those are in brackets, so you're told that on the fly. I did send him some things and now think he remains interested, etc. Interested is in quotes because that's what the editor at Houghton Mifflin said. And it was so kind for you to offer to type for me, so more than kind, so headlong. But I found that an acquaintance here had a typewriter I could use after all. I am sending 2 pictures we managed to get of the Doves the other day. One shows Mr. Dove bowing to his wife with stiff knees and his throat puffed out. They are presenting quite a problem just now, as the mating season is coming on just as we are about to start traveling again. We have provided a small raffia nest and are urging them to line it with pink cotton for the pleasing color effect, but I am afraid it may be very difficult to travel around Spain with a cage of young doves. I was so pleased when I found that my friend Margaret, that is Margaret Miller, had chosen to send me as part of a Christmas present, a copy of your poem Pigeons, not realizing I could get it, that is Poetry Magazine, where it first appeared, here. She also copied out and sent me parts of your review of Wallace Stevens. The last paragraph, particularly what you said about the experts, pleased us both enormously, and here Gero appends only the segment of that review that has the quote. The quote is when Marianne Moore, writing about Wallace Stevens, refers to, quote, wild boars of Philistinism who rush about interfering with experts. Marianne Moore was a great critic. Actually, Elizabeth Bishop is really a really, really good prose stylist. And naturally, there's a part of my own poetic appreciation sensibility that says that she was only that. And that her poems are just exquisite prose, but not actually poetry. That is totally sacrosanct. That's totally heresy to say about Elizabeth Bishop. And I'm ready to withdraw it. I merely say it because once you get bit by Longfellow-style end rhymes and easy scansion, it's tough to unbite yourself. But anyway, she goes on. I liked Mr. Stevens' article in Life and Letters Today. It was the first of his prose I had seen. And most of all, in spite of what you say in your letter, I liked Virginia Britannia. See, the younger writer is disagreeing with the older writer. It's not fawning. All these things have been extra consolation to me since I have been rather ill too. Or I should have answered your letter sooner. I went to the American hospital here just after Christmas for a mastoid operation and just got home about a week ago. It is a very slow affair, but really very interesting, involving all the physics of sound and balance, such fancy bones and tuning forks. I am quite recovered now, except for a half-shaved head and a turban, which I hope makes me resemble Alexander Pope a little. But all those poems and articles went along to the hospital with me, and the Oxford Book of 17th Century Verse, so I got along very nicely. I remember you once spoke of William Empson's The 7 Types of Ambiguity, and I wonder what you think about it. I have been reading it again and following with his new book some versions of the Pastoral, some of which I think is excellent. The parts where I'm familiar with what he's talking about, that is. I wasn't able to get very far with the clavichord before I became sick, but I hope I'm going to be able to take some lessons with Ralph Kirkpatrick next year. I studied some of the simplest of Bach and Purcell. I have a beautiful set of preludes and suites of his, really for harpsichord, but I am afraid I am not a purist. We should have liked nothing better, Miss Moore, than your being able to go to Spain with us. We are leaving here about the 15th and going first to Morocco, which we think may be nice and hot. Then we shall go north through Spain very slowly. We are going by way of London in order to see the Chinese exhibition. It sounds very good. I have been given a book to prepare me, Chinese Art by Leigh Ashton and Basil Gray, really just the book of photographs. There's nothing like a hospital for making one despair of health and energy, etc., and I do wish you would tell me how you are. I have decided to enclose another picture, a little advertisement for Vichy water, which you may not think is funny at all, though it is supposed to be. That is one letter to Marianne Moore, and I want to read just another one before we talk about it just a bit, because there's Gero, bless his heart, he also quotes from postcards that people have saved. But we get another letter to Marianne Moore, written from Spain in 1936. Morocco was so nice, in spite of Moorish architecture, which is so awful, and rather unfriendly atmosphere which has been caused by the French occupation. One immediately sympathizes with the Moors. That we have stayed probably longer than we should have. There are camel trains everywhere, and we saw lots of baby camels. In spite of the disagreeable nature of their elders, the little camels seemed quite affectionate. I saw one almost knocking his driver down with his demonstrations, rubbing and leaning against him. All the houses and city walls in Marrakesh are covered with storks' nests. They are very familial, as a French lady said to me, and wander around with 6-foot sticks in their beaks, building their houses exactly as well as the natives. But the nicest of all were the little owls we saw in the country. Stubby and almost tailless, about 6 inches high and very soft-looking. They would sit right by the side of the road, sometimes in the road, and stare quietly back at us as we went up to them. Then, just when we got quite close, their eyes would blink once, and their face would seem really to change expression, becoming surprised and annoyed with itself for being surprised, and the owl would fly off. The musicians are really quite good, and we liked the music too. We went to several cafes to see the singing and dancing with our guide, and one of the best things I saw were two very large Negroes, very black, one dressed in lavender and one in pink, one playing a large lute with a long feathered quill, and the other a violin which he held upside down, the neck on his shoulder, while they both sang as loudly or shouted as hoarsely as they could. It looked very much like a parody of the angels in an Italian painting I saw in London. The dancing, of course, is very improper, but sometimes extremely amusing, as, for example, when the lady, to show how still she keeps the top of her head, dances with a tray on it, holding a teapot and glasses full of tea. Without spilling any, she even lies down and rolls over, and at the end sits on the floor and takes a glass of tea off the tray and offers it to you with her toes. I saw the advertisement for The Penguin and Other Verse, which was Marianne Moore's new book of poetry, in Life and Letters Today. It sounds very fancy and very nice, and I'm eager to see it. Oh dear, I am worried by your speaking of my, quote, leisurely life. My conscience is troubling me so badly these days that it takes it for confirmation of the very worst. And it is particularly bad since so many people I know are having such a difficult time. We are coming home at the end of June, and I am going to try to work and study much more seriously and thoroughly than I ever have before. Not that that in any way has anything to do with people's difficulties. See the way she's constantly questioning herself, constantly working backwards on her own sentiments. And notice also how completely free that is. How completely free of that worrying, bone-shaking tendency she is when she's describing things. When she's describing the wonder of what she's seeing, that is gone. P.S. Do you think that the Southern Review contest might be a good thing to enter? P.P.S. The Holy Week processions are not being held in Spanish towns because of the communist troubles, but here they draw so many tourists that the government has ordered them to go on, well interspersed with police, whether the church wants to or not. A Spanish monk in Tangier, when we asked him whether they were going to be held or not, said, yes, but not for God. Because you can't have a religious ceremony for God in a communist country. Those letters like that, I've been so enjoying rereading this book for this read-along. They really do capture the person. I think that, as I've often thought about this, there's no way that you could do it, but I've often thought for this anthology that it should include as many replies as possible. A lot of these letters seem very much in a conversation with their recipients, and we don't get that. And it's a lack. We don't always know what's being referred to in Elizabeth Bishop's responses, because she, like a lot of correspondence, those of you who remember snail mail correspondence, like a lot of correspondence, I believe that she's writing a lot of these letters with the letter she's responding to open in front of her. She's not walking around writing these things and recalling what she can. She's got the text in front of her and is able to quote from it. I like the quiet note of both defiance and supplication. She is definitely asking this older, more experienced writer for advice, but also making sure that she knows that they both know she's her own person. It's a wonderful way to start this anthology. Which the only other note that I want to raise this time around is one that I'm wondering how many of you wondered about as well. I always wonder about it when I read this collection of letters. Now, in the 21st century, when I go back to this, I wonder about it. I didn't when I first read it. Never crossed my mind in the 90s or even the early 2000s when I would go back to this book. It never crossed my mind to wonder about this kind of anthology. And now I do. Now I read this and think, we've got quotes from postcards, for Pete's sake. We've got long quotes, long exchanges of letters, and those don't exist anymore. I wonder, I know it's a trite question to ask, but I wonder what on earth will be the 21st century's version of books like this? The wonder of this, the fact that Elizabeth Bishop often would write a long, bitterly confessional letter to a recipient, and at the end would urge them to destroy it. Most of those recipients did not destroy it. They kept it, sometimes lovingly, sometimes for decades. Where is that now? How will this, not only this kind of book, but this kind of intimacy, will it be just lost? You can picture those little owls on the road. those little owls, like everything else here, are conjured perfectly by a great wordsmith and then gone. It's very ephemeral artwork. It's a very ephemeral art form, the letter, forced into permanence by collections like this that existed for centuries. Will they exist in the 21st century? Will they? I don't really know. I don't know, and I'm not sure that anybody does. I mean, these letters and postcards and keepsakes, they like I said, they were preserved. People would wrap them in twine or ribbon and keep them in chests or in boxes for decades. It took a lot of work for Bob Gero to assemble this book. A lot of work. But that work was possible because people were saving those things. What if those things don't exist? I worry about it for the great talents that are just coming to the fruit of their potential in the 21st century. Those talents, the equivalent of the young Elizabeth Bishop in this book, have never written a letter. They've never written a snail mail letter, and not only that, but we're not even talking about keepsakes. We're talking about enforced loss of material. The letters that they wrote, that you wrote on your first computer, the emails that you wrote on your first computer, are not retrievable at all. Not by the recipient, not by you, not by the company that made that computer, not by any of the servers that are long gone. That material is not retrievable. It's simply gone, completely gone. That's it's always when I turn to this book that I realize the magnitude of that. But anyway, that is our first installment of One Art. I know that a lot of you have gotten a copy of this book. I hope that you're enjoying it. A lot of you both paid me the compliment of getting a copy of this book to be part of the Steve Tiberius Donoghue Book Club, but also told me a lot if you mentioned not only did you buy the book for the club, but you've never read a letter collection before. That's amazing. I very much want to know what you think of it. I think they are wonderful nightstand reading. A friend of mine used to call letters collection, used to say they are the best nightstand reading because unless it's Jacques Barzoon, the letters are short. There might be long ones, but it's perfect for just doing, little handfuls of snacks here and there. I wonder if you're finding it that way, or how compelling you're finding it as a reading experience. Tell me all. As if we were in this room for a real book club. Tell me all. And we will convene next week for roughly the next 150 pages. It's not a hard and fast thing here. So I will wrap this up for now, and I will see you then. Thank you.